activities have been rather systematic over many decades, but especially worse in the last 10 years. After 9/11, there was a lot of concern, and much of it justifiable on what had happened. It was a terrible day for us, but instead of trying to understand the principle that the CIA has analyzed and written about called blowback, they decided to blame the American citizens and passed the Patriot Act and penalized the American citizens as if that was a So we'll put that high on the list for repeal. Yeah!
Up to 190.
The executive order passed just a couple weeks ago said that the Defense Production Act would be renewed. And the Defense Production Act, which was passed 50 years ago, gives the President authority under times of war to nationalize everything. Very, very dangerous piece of legislation to be on the books. But the President renewed that by executive order, not a legislative effect. He changed the wording, not under wartime conditions, but even under peacetime conditions he can make. Now we've all heard, the big complaint about the President trying to interfere and lecturing the Supreme Court of Obamacare. And he does, the court, generally speaking, the legislative branch and the executive branch is not supposed to do that. But that was rather minor compared to what the President actually does. Because, lecturing is one thing, but what about the interference, him assuming that he can, on his own announcement, executive order, that he's allowed to become the prosecutor and the judge and the jury and the executioner and execute and assassinate American citizens?
Boom!
So that certainly should be high on the agenda for changing it. All the laws that have been passed by executive order are up for grabs, because although I personally disagree with the idea that you should legislate anything by the executive order, I would say that the constitutional president has the authority to use the executive order to cancel out all the unlawful.
President Paul! President Paul! President Paul!
Courts have been helpful for protecting our civil liberties. There was a vote this week, it was 5-4, to permit law enforcement officers to strip search without probable cause of anybody. And everybody should know what's going on at the airports. And I would think if we tolerate this and look at what the pictures that happen of all the groping and things go on and knowing what kind of powers, if we don't do something about it, we have to start blaming ourselves. We've been too lackadaisical, so we need to wake up and do something about it. There was a recent piece of legislation passed to protect very special people. These very special people that want special attention are those ones who are protected by Secret Service. I keep thinking, I didn't use the Secret Service, but I didn't know quite what kind of people they were anyway. But that's beside the point. But what the law says was, if you're one of those special people and you're protected by the Secret Service, that you have special rights. If anybody gets within a certain distance of that individual and demonstrates by holding up a sign and politicking, you can end up getting 10 years for that. What happened to the First Amendment? I think the arrogance and the elitism of the politicians ought to be challenged by us, and the only way we can do that is change the electorate and change the Congress and change the presidency.
Yeah!
But there was a saying that went around that said that, you know, if you weren't a bleeding heart liberal when you were 20, you didn't have a heart. But if you weren't a conservative by the time you were 40, then you didn't have a brain.